For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
Good morning on this Sunday, April 20th, 2025. I'm Lilene Fifield, and I will be your service leader for today. We join with other Unitarians in the tradition of inviting the gong 3 times, once in memory of the Cow Creek tribe, who for so many generations nurtured and loved this land, as did our congregants who lived here, built, nurtured this congregation before us. The second time, to honor those calling us home today, working, maintaining, and growing our vision. And the last gong for those Unitarians in the future who will carry forward the dream. I want to welcome you to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist congregation. We all come from many places, along different paths, and bringing different truths and different backgrounds. If you're here for the first time, know we have a special welcome to you. We hope you'll find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. In our congregation, you can be yourself, whomever you are, whoever you love, however you describe yourself, or name the holy. You are welcome here. Our speaker today is Liz James of the UU Hysterical Society. I'll tell you more about Liz James later. For now, much appreciation goes to our staff, our media tech, Jake Tranter, and our church administrator, Genevieve Gonzalez. Our chalice lighting for today is entitled Searching for Justice and Hope by Summer Albiate. May the lighting of this chalice today, no matter how difficult we may feel, help us rekindle compassion and mercy within the deep crevices of our heart, so that we can once again bring justice and hope to the world, struggling to find its humanity and struggling to find its soul. For our opening words today, we have a story for all ages titled After the Fall by Dan Santat. It's a video about how Humpty Dumpty got back up again.
After the Fall, How Humpty Dumpty Got Back Up Again. A story by Dan Santat. My name is Humpty Dumpty. This was my favorite spot, high up on the wall. I know, it's an odd place for an egg to be, but I loved being close to the birds. And then one day, I fell. I'm sort of famous for that part. Folks called it the Great Fall, which sounds a little grand. It was just an accident, but it changed my life. Fortunately, all the king's men managed to put me back together. Well, most of me. There were some parts that couldn't be healed with bandages and glue. After that day, I became afraid of heights. I was so scared that it kept me from enjoying some of my favorite things. I walked past the wall every day, and I would think about climbing that ladder again. I really missed the birds and being high above the city, but I could never do it because I knew that accidents can happen. I eventually settled for watching the birds from the ground. It wasn't the same, but it was better than nothing. And then one day, an idea flew by. Making planes was harder than I thought. It was easy to get cuts and scratches. But day after day, I kept trying. And trying. Until I got it just My plane was perfect, and it flew like nothing could stop it. I hadn't felt that happy in a long time. It wasn't the same as being up in the sky with the birds, but it was close enough. Unfortunately, accidents happen. They always do. I almost walked away again. But then I thought about all the time I'd spent working on my plane and all the other things I'd missed. I decided I was going to climb that wall. But the higher I got, the more nervous I felt. I didn't want to admit it. I was terrified. I didn't look up. I didn't look down. I just kept climbing, one step at a time, until I was no longer afraid. Maybe now you won't think of me as that egg who was famous for falling. Crack, crack. Hopefully you'll remember me as the egg who got back up. Whee! And learned how to fly. Life begins when you get back up.
Please join us at home as you feel able for singing. Now let us sing. Each service, we do what we call our joys and concerns candle lighting. I am lighting a candle today for Betsy Walters, who has passed on this week from our congregation. I lit that second candle for all of us, for our congregation, knowing that at this point in time we are separate in ways that we normally would be together. Let us take a few moments now at home with self as we listen to Spirit of Life, to think about a current joy or perhaps a concern in your life. You might wish to light a candle if you have one available. We are supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join with us. Your gift to us at this time can be made through the donation button, and we thank you. It's my pleasure now to introduce our speaker. Our presenter today is Liz James. Liz is a minister who travels. I'll tell you a little more about her, but her sermon title is The Inherent Mirth in Dignity, and comes to us from Boise, Idaho. So now let me tell you a little about Liz. Liz is a founder of a 270,000 person online Unitarian community called the Unitarian Universalist Historical Society. She has authored half of the Cracked Cup podcast and is working on a book currently with Skinner House Press. She also runs Myth and Dignity, an organization devoted to supporting diverse expressions of Unitarian Universalism. She believes in a Unitarian Universalism that is filled with meaning and joy, and that sees change as an adventure. Before her sermon, you will be hearing the anthem by Leonard Cohen. Here I'd like to suggest that as we are listening to the anthem, let it be sort of a spoken meditation. See where the words take you. Liz will have more references to the anthem in her sermon. Her sermon will be followed with no pause by the song Building a New Way, sung by the UU Virtual Choir. And now, Anthem by Leonard Cohen.
The birds they sang at the break of day. Start again, I heard them say. Don't dwell on what has passed away, or what is yet to be. Yeah, the war, they will be fought again. The holy dove, she will be cut again. Bought and sold and bought again. dove is never free. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. We asked for signs, the signs were sent. The birth betrayed, the marriage spent. Yeah, the widowhood of every government. Signs for all to see. I can't run no more with that lawless crowd, while the killers in high places say their prayers out loud. But they've summoned up a thundercloud. They're gonna hear from me. That still could ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. You can add up the parts, you won't have the sum. You can strike up the march, there is no drum. Every heart to love will come, but like a refugee. That still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's so wonderful to be here with all the blossoms. I left a blizzard 3 days ago for this leg of my journey, so this is wonderful. I'm going to start with a story. Just as I was beginning seminary, my congregation moved into a new building. I was on the board at the time. I was one of those general busybody types with their nose and everything. And so somehow I got myself involved in renovating the space to make it suitable for Unitarian Universalists. First and foremost, this meant removing the giant wooden cross from the front of the room. So if you're new, I need to clarify. UUs do not have a problem with crosses specifically. We're not vampires. There are a lot of people who are both UU and Christian, but some aren't, few. And so lifting up just one perspective like that would have been a bit more Jesus than my congregation was looking for on a weekly basis. You get it. So the theology of this was clear, but in practical terms, it turns out wood is quite heavy. The phrase cross to bear, that's not just a metaphor. Getting that thing off of the wall was a feat of engineering and a near-death experience, and now what? A ginormous cross doesn't exactly fit in the back of the minivan. It was going to need to be cut up into pieces. You can't use the circular saw in the building because sawdust flies everywhere. And the building committee had already told me no more power saws in the sanctuary. And so it was an informal rule, but it was on its way to becoming a formal one. So this was the line of thinking that led me to a conversation with my friend Anne, who is a woman of great maturity and perspective. This is a sensitive time for your neighbors, Anne explained. With the loss of the old church that shrank until they couldn't afford their building, your new neighbors are going to be grieving. But there's potential for new connection, for inviting people in. And Liz, the community's introduction to Unitarian Universalism, it can't be you taking a saw to a cross on the front lawn of the building, no matter how practical you think that is. So I'm not sure, in the end, how the cross was removed. For some reason, they didn't involve me any further. I think maybe someone had a woodworking shop and they used it as reclaimed wood, which is this whole other great metaphor I would love to unpack. But in any case, it was gone. So here's the thing. It had hung there for many years, beside the huge vaulted windows from which the light streamed down, and it's true what they say. Light really does transform everything it touches, particularly on a timescale of years. And so the paint around that cross had grown distinctly lighter, but the paint behind the cross, not so much. And so now, immediately beside the pulpit, we had this clear stenciled outline, which could have been solved by repainting, of course, but in order to do that, we would have had to agree on paint colors. And the decorating committee had pointed out colors couldn't be chosen until the fabric for the new chairs, which would replace the pews, had been chosen. And the worship committee felt the pews couldn't be removed until we talked about how we embody our identity in the structure of our worship space, particularly when it comes to religious authority. And so, for many months, we did not worship beside a giant cross. Instead, we worshiped beside the very conspicuous shadow that was cast by its absence. A giant metaphorical Jesus was here symbol stenciled beside our heads. In more ways than one, actually. On the literal wall, of course, but also in the conspicuous role that the Protestant tradition we come from plays in everything we do. It's in the tunes of the songs we sing, in the piano accompaniment in the format of a sermon, and the fact that we're meeting on a Sunday morning, often led by a professional, often in a building owned for that purpose. We've expanded our theology, but we've kept embodying it in the way we've embodied it for centuries. To me, the shadow of the cross on the wall on Sunday morning was a physical manifestation of a structure that was frozen in time. It said, we've decided to do things differently, but we're not quite doing that just yet because the details are still stuck in committee. So, at around the time of this shadow of the cross business, I was feeling pretty stuck in committee myself. I was deeply in love with Unitarian Universalism and its values, and I was expressing that love by going to seminary, where we talked about this shadow of the cross stuff. We wouldn't have used quite that language, but we talked a lot about how the rapid pace of change in society, how we might be able to meet those changes. We talked about modern needs and how we might expand our structures to meet those needs. But we had those conversations in a university, mirroring the old ways of doing things with every detail of our structure, with all the expense that goes with academia, and the inertia, and the gatekeeping. By approaching the issue from just that perspective, we were taking down the cross, but continuing to function within the confines of its shape. I sucked at all of it, by the way. Even when I'm not critiquing the very premise of school as I was, I'm a terrible student. Forcing my brain to study has always felt like trying to wrestle an active toddler into a car seat. I had long since received an ADHD diagnosis, which is the medical term for that whole active toddler car seat situation, and I'd received medication and behavior suggestions, and of course all the messages that go with all of that. At the time, I saw myself as disordered, as the wrong shape for academia. But I loved UUism. I wanted to serve it, and this was how you did it. So I was determined to squeeze into the shape that was being asked of me. Sometimes I was determined. On my better behaved days, I was determined. On my less disciplined days, I would skip the books and the sermons we were supposed to be watching, and I would do what I love to do, which is laugh. And I remember one day procrastinating on my homework, watching these stand-up comedians on YouTube and thinking, hey, wait a second. They are talking about the exact same things that the people in the books I'm reading talk about. Big topics often, tricky ones. Stand-up comedians tackle it all. Religion, money, race, ethics. But they do it in a way that's funny and accessible and easy to pay attention to. This was the beginning of a doorway in me. Maybe the fact that I had trouble paying attention to high academia wasn't the flaw that made me a crappy minister, although I definitely would have been a crappy minister, but maybe that challenge was what would equip me to have conversations about those same topics in other ways, ways that would make space for people like me. And so the farther away I moved from the powerless position of a grade school child, the more assertive that line of thinking became. I would sit in my school lecture and the usual messages would run through my mind. The problem is that I need to be better at paying attention. But now there was this voice that argued back, that argued, how come it's always that I have to work harder to pay attention? I have been working as hard as I can to pay attention for years. How come this guy never has to work any harder at being easier to pay attention to? When it wasn't dry, the stuff I was learning was also it wasn't what I had expected. I'd always had these stories in my head, like that of Michael Servetus, the Unitarian martyr, chased and persecuted for his brave act of speaking the truth to John Calvin. Turns out, if you read Servetus's writings in his own words, he is smart, he's very articulate, he's also obnoxious. He doesn't just tell his truth, he stalks John Calvin. He writes him letters, arguing every little point. He writes and distributes books and pamphlets. At one point, Calvin has a warrant out for Servetus' arrest, and Servetus goes to one of Calvin's talks and sits in the front row and stares him down. He's like the worst type of internet troll, but in real life. Now, he didn't deserve what happened to him. Nobody deserves that. But after reading his actual words dripping with arrogance and condescension, there was like a little piece of me that sympathized with John Calvin in the whole thing. I mean, I know that guy. I have chaired meetings containing that guy. Sometimes I've been that guy. He is the best of us in some ways and the worst of us in others. Or Emerson and Thoreau. I had always admired the transcendentalists, how they forged these intentional, beautiful lives filled with integrity. Learning a bit more about it, Thoreau could retreat to the woods to suck the marrow out of life because he was living on land that Emerson gave him for free. Where'd the land come from, Thoreau? And the story about how you're making this bold choice to live a simple life in the woods, think we can fairly say that Thoreau didn't invent that idea. In fact, before Thoreau's people arrived, that was the only way anyone ever lived in those woods. Thoreau went on these long walks and wrote down his thoughts because he had all the time in the world. A whole system supported him in doing that. He didn't have kids to take care of. He had his free land. And we're pretty sure Emerson's wife was doing his laundry. Louisa May Alcott, meanwhile, is living just a few miles away, making all those same theological points about simplicity and intentionality and virtue in what became her best-selling novel, Little Women. But she wrote in a way that was not academic or prosaic. While her dad sat in the study talking philosophy with Thoreau and Emerson, he did not work for much of Louisa's life. Louisa got to work writing. In a world not built for women to have a voice, she found a way to have one. In a world not built for women to earn, she found a way to feed her family with her voice. And she did all of that while doing her own laundry. So, I'm sure you can hear my frustration here. I was not the only one. We malcontents found one another, and we bonded, and then we used our pent-up irritation and our detailed knowledge to play witty and very historically specific pranks on each other. So one time, some of our friends who ran a UU housing cooperative in Boston posted online that they were accepting applications for new roommates. A few of us applied, as mostly dead, mostly Unitarians and Universalists. We applied as Emerson, listing Thoreau under pets. We applied as Michael Servetus, and under food allergies, we listed barbecue. I know it's a little soon for that. We applied as the people we thought were missing from our mainstream history, too. Reverend Olympia Brown, the first woman in the US to be ordained. Dorothy Dix, whose tireless lobbying transformed conditions for institutionalized people in the United States, Canada, and several other countries. These women aren't as well known as heroes, but when you line their lives up against Thoreau in the woods or Servetus with his letters, you can't deny their stories deserve just as much acknowledgement. The housing co-op wrote back and invited us for an interview, although they did caution us that some housemates may not have experience in living with the dead and may require education on matters of corporeal privilege. Oh, right? All of this was followed by a week of messaging and coordinating and giggling and pranking that left me feeling warm and connected. Connected with my peers, with my UU heritage, gently poking fun at the things that needed to be knocked down a peg or two, lifting up stories that aren't always told. The prank connected me with my values, too. As we coordinated to know just how far we could push things, keeping everything funny for everyone. Above all, that prank left me feeling a part of Unitarian Universalism. We understood those shared jokes because they arose out of shared values. I mean, corporeal privilege? That is a UU joke. This was a space that had room for me, where I didn't have to change shape to fit into a prescribed shadow. I didn't want it to end. And so on a whim, I created a Facebook group, which I named the UU Hysterical Society, and I put 11 people in it. The name was a play on the UU Historical Society, who have changed their names twice since then, so nobody ever gets my joke. People usually just point out that the word hysterical has a troublesome history, used as a weapon to discredit and sometimes harm women. And they're right. Throughout history, the symptoms of hysteria have been very varied. Sometimes it was a woman who was struggling with what we would now call a mental illness or a disability. Sometimes it was a physical condition, like epilepsy, or a life choice, like deciding not to get married. Often it was a woman who was unable or unwilling to toe the line in some way. Sometimes it was a woman who was an awesome firebrand warrior pioneer of strength, too. Hysteria was like this catch-all word for any woman who was being inconvenient and must be treated. A hysterical woman is a woman who's the wrong shape. And I, who was struggling so hard to fit into the shadow of the cross, I loved my hysterical society. It was an expression of my values. It was a space that fit me. It was a break from the ministerial formation process at a time when that process was starting to break me. For years, I didn't think of it as anything other than Liz's personal refuge. By the time I clued into what was going on, we had about 20,000 members sharing jokes and visiting. And someone posted that she nearly drove her car off the road after spotting a UU church. She said she thought we were a joke religion that someone made up for the purposes of the UU Hysterical Society, and that, like, seeing a real UU church was like spotting a unicorn. She almost drove her car off the road, she said, shouting, "They're real! They're real!" And I thought, oh wow, we're telling 20,000 people about what Unitarian Universalism is. And then I thought, oh no. I am not the right person to lead this. I didn't finish the assigned reading. I still haven't. Fortunately, I didn't have to be the right person for the job. A religious educator named Kathy joined the team at that time, and she was able to fill in some of those gaps. Together, we stewarded the group as it continued to grow, and I toyed with the idea that maybe we should become something more. Maybe we should become like a legal entity that could apply for grants to fund all this work Kathy was putting in. But even thinking along those lines felt presumptive. Like, who did I think we were? It's not a rhetorical question. I had no idea who we were or why we were or what we were doing. And then in November of 2019, something happened that changed my perspective on the group forever. My friend, Reverend Mbutsa Ndajijimana, approached me for help raising money to settle a group of refugees. In November of 2019, the Hysterical Society held its first charity fundraiser. It was holiday themed because Christmas, refugees. We sold funny PDFs like labels for wine that said, "Hey, this was water a minute ago." We sold tags that said, "It's the thought that counts, and I way overthought this." We sold flasks that said, "For when thoughts and prayers are not enough." And "This is my spiritual practice," which is a pun, so it's a joke in two ways. And we raised more than $16,000. And on one of my trips, the post office guy looked at me and said, "Okay, I'll bite. What's a UU Hysterical Society?" And I didn't respond how I usually did when asked what I do for a living. Normally I mumble, "I run a Facebook group that makes fun of my religion," which is not an accurate answer, but usually does end the conversation. Instead, I lifted my head up and I grinned. And I answered with confidence and said, "We're a group that is about joy and community and refugees." We had started gathering around laughter, which is a good in and of itself. It's like a soup kitchen for the soul. But we were slowly turning into more than that. We were still about laughter and community, but we were also about bringing dignity to people who deserved a chance to build a new life. The Canadian not-for-profit Mirth and Dignity was incorporated the following month. Inherent Mirth and Dignity. To this day, 100% of the profit from our online store and holiday fundraiser go to the charity that my friend Mbutsa founded. But most of what we do is support for UUism that appears in ways that aren't supported by traditional institutions. We started with the Hysterical Society, then we added a board game ministry, and there's a TikTok project, then a comedy podcast, most recently online soulful singing. I could go on. This is not an infomercial, so I won't. You don't need that much detail, unless you share our vision of UUism beyond traditional structures, in which case you might want to become one of the people who supports us with a $5 a month pledge. Okay, now I'm done. For now, what I actually want to draw your attention to is the overarching arc of the story, that feeling of not quite fitting, which is, I find, a feeling that a lot of UUs can empathize with. Many of us, not all, became UU because we didn't fit into a community we were born into. We figured out, as UUs, how to be diverse theologically, and I believe that we are also right now in process of creating structural diversity, creating a bunch of different ways to be a Unitarian Universalist. We have together inherited a shadow of a cross, a set of institutions and practices that define real religion that don't fully work for modern communities. I've heard from people who feel like they're tired, like they're trying to do too much, or feel focused on the wrong things. Many of our leaders are exhausted, and our best efforts don't always seem to do the trick. Congregations are looking to build a new way. For some, this means overhauling huge things like format and timing of gathering and structures. For others, it looks like smaller changes, maybe rethinking how our services happen, or putting significant energy into online options, or looking to rethink what worship space looks like this congregation's plan for a space that encompasses everything from light and honoring nature to working towards carbon neutrality, which is pretty amazing. We are not bound by what we have inherited. We can build spaces that fit us, literally and metaphorically. We can step out of the shadow of the cross on the wall and into the outline of the aspirational painter's tape on the floor. We can stretch into a new shape. Maybe we don't need to work harder. Maybe we've already been working as hard as we can for years. What if the pressure we experience doesn't mean what we think it does? What if we're not cracking because we're breaking, but because we're turning into something different? What if we lean in to building something new? I have no idea where that would lead, any more than I had any idea where that prank in 2015 would lead. But I know that the first step is to give ourselves permission to be who we are, not who we think we're supposed to be. What would we do differently if we saw ourselves as hatching? What if this were an adventure? As the Leonard Cohen lyric tells us so beautifully, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There are cracks in everything. That's how the light gets in. I think that's true, but it's not the whole picture. The cracks are how the light gets in, sure. Sometimes, though, the cracks are how the light gets out. The cracks are how the hatching starts.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. A new way, a new way, a new way.
Hi, it's nice to have you back. That was some amazing music, and certainly Liz James provided us with lots of things to think about, and I hope that you enjoyed the last song, Building a New Way. We move now to our closing words for today's service, which are entitled, Our Calling in the World. We've come to the end of our service, but not our calling in the world. We close our time together with the humble reminder that justice and equity are our spiritual practice to embrace. Each day, every day, we are blessed to be the embodiment of what is possible when justice and equity ground us in all that we do. May we go forth with the light and warmth of our chalice in our hearts, and may our lives be reflections of the beauty, peace, and joy that is possible in the world. And may the love we find whenever we are together sustain us as we go our separate ways. We leave you today with a familiar song by Betsy Rose entitled, May You Walk in Your Life. And thank you for joining us.
May you walk in your life as a warrior, clear and loving and strong. May you walk in your life as a warrior, trusting the path you are on. May you walk in your life as a healer, clear and loving and strong. May you walk in your life as a healer, trusting the path you are on. May you walk in your life as a lover, clear and loving and strong. May you walk in your life as a lover, trusting the path you are on. May you walk in your life as a woman, clear and loving and strong. May you walk in your life as a woman, trusting the path you are on, clear and loving and strong, trusting